Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to talk about a threat that can turn a totally legitimate Windows feature into a skeleton key for your entire network. It's called PetitPotam, and trust me, it can lead to a complete domain takeover. Yeah, I know, it sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood hacker movie, right? But the scary part is, the answer is a resounding yes. We're going to break down exactly how an attacker can use a single simple request to get total control of a Windows domain. All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start by really understanding what the PetitPotam vulnerability is. Then we'll walk through the entire attack step by step. After that, we'll get into why the old NTLM protocol is still causing so many problems. And then we'll pivot to solutions, how to secure your domain controllers and your all-important certificate authority, before we wrap it all up with a master checklist. All right, first up, let's get right to the heart of the matter. What exactly is PetitPotam? Okay, so here's the first thing you absolutely need to get. PetitPotam is not a software bug you can just patch and forget about. Nope. It's an attack method that abuses a built-in protocol, the Encrypting File System Remote Protocol, or EFSRP. This tool is designed for legitimate remote work on encrypted files, but attackers figured out how to use it to basically poke a server, like a domain controller, and force it to authenticate to a machine that they control. But forcing that authentication, that's really only half the battle for the attacker. The real magic, or the real danger, I should say, comes from the NTLM relay attack. The attacker basically plays middleman, they catch that authentication attempt from the domain controller, and then they just relay it. They forward it on to a much more valuable target to impersonate the DC and waltz right in. So you've got PetitPotam on one hand and an NTLM relay on the other. How do they actually come together to create this complete disaster? Let's see how the whole intrusion plays out. I love this analogy because it is just perfect. This isn't about breaking into one room or one server. The goal here is so much bigger. The attacker is trying to trick the one system that issues all the security credentials, your certificate authority, into giving them a master key that can open literally any door. Okay, so this breaks down the entire attack chain perfectly. Let's walk through it. Step 1. The attacker uses PetitPotam to force the domain controller to reach out. Step 2. The DC does what it's told and tries to authenticate using NTLM. Step 3, and this is the key part, the attacker snags that authentication and relays it over to the certificate authority. Step 4. Now pretending to be the DC, the attacker asks for a digital certificate, and the CA just hands it over. And finally, Step 5, boom. Armed with that valid certificate, the attacker can now impersonate the domain controller, which basically makes them a domain admin. And the results of that? It's catastrophic. It's a complete takeover. We're talking game over. With domain admin rights, an attacker owns your entire network. They can push ransomware to every single computer, steal all your data, create hidden admin accounts, you name it. You know, this whole thing just raises a huge question, right? If this NTLM protocol is so easy to abuse with relay attacks, why in the world are we still using it? Let's dig into that. Get ready for this number, because it is absolutely staggering. Recent studies show that a massive 90% of corporate networks are still vulnerable to NTLM relay attacks. This isn't some obscure issue, it's a huge systemic risk, because this protocol is just everywhere. So why can't we just, flip a switch and turn NTLM off? Well, it all comes down to one thing: legacy compatibility. So many older apps, printers, and other systems were built to use it. If you just disable it everywhere, you could break critical business operations. So companies are caught in this really tough spot, trying to balance keeping their old but necessary systems online while not exposing their entire network to these kinds of modern attacks. Okay, we've talked a lot about the problem. Now let's get into the good stuff, the solutions. And your first line of defense, the absolute starting point, is to harden the initial target, your domain controller. So here are the key things you need to do, right now. First, if you can, disable NTLM on your domain controllers. If you can't do that, then you have to enable something called Extended Protection for Authentication, or EPA. You should also be requiring SMB signing to block session hijacking, and of course, it goes without saying, keep up with your security updates from Microsoft. All right, next up, we have to talk about protecting the real crown jewels in this whole attack, the certificate authority. Because if the domain controller is the way in, the Active Directory Certificate Services server is the ultimate prize. Look, I need to be crystal clear about this. The entire attack we've just discussed is laser-focused on tricking this one service, your ADCS server. Protecting it isn't just a recommendation, it's absolutely non-negotiable if you want to prevent a full domain compromise. So how do you actually go about locking it down? Well, you've got a few options here, each with its own trade-offs. The absolute best thing you can do with the highest security impact is to just disable NTLM on the Certificate Authority server itself. If that's not possible because of legacy stuff, your next best bet is to enable EPA and require all traffic to use HTTPS. And finally, a simple one. If you don't use the web enrollment feature, just turn it off. It's an easy way to shrink your attack surface. Okay, I know that was a lot to take in, so let's pull all of these defenses together into a single, straightforward checklist that you can use to start securing your network. So here's your checklist. First up, hunt down NTLM on your network and get rid of it wherever you can. Make sure you're enforcing those key settings like EPA and SMB signing. Lock down that ADCS server. Use network segmentation to make it harder for attackers to get around. Keep a close eye on your logs for any weird authentication activity. And finally, live by the principle of least privilege. Make sure no account has more access than it absolutely needs to do its job. And that really brings us to the most important takeaway from all of this. PetitPotam is a huge reminder that real security is so much more than just installing the latest patch. It forces you to ask a much deeper question about your own network. You might have patched a specific flaw, but have you actually secured the underlying protocols that everything is built on? That's the real key. Thanks for joining me.